What do you drive? Do you drive an electric vehicle? Do you work in electric vehicles? What's it like being a woman working in the still male-dominated automotive sector these days? Well, today we're going to find out from one of the women at the very top of the auto sector in a rare interview. So pull out your notepad and pen or tablet to take notes and listen up. Welcome to Electric Ladies Podcast, formerly known as Green Connections Radio. We bring you insights and tips from remarkably innovative women about corporate responsibility, energy, and sustainability related issues. I'm your host, Joan Michelson. We talk about innovation, leadership, technologies, and careers, always bringing a new perspective. Find us anywhere you like to listen to podcasts, on our website, electricladiespodcast.com, and through my Forbes blog as well. Please pass it on to your friends and feel free to leave us a review, preferably a 5-star one, but there you go. So chances are that if you own a car, or you will in the future, that it will be an electric vehicle. Why? Well, mostly because you're not going to have any options. Most automakers are phasing out the traditional internal combustion engine vehicles that we're all accustomed to as part of their efforts to avert climate change. Sales of EVs are growing fast, even doubling, I think, every year, but they're still only about 8% of total sales. Full disclosure, I am totally biased. I led the communications and co-led the sales and marketing of the electric car division of Chrysler, and I'm on the board of a very cool car museum, so I am a bona fide vehicle girl. Full disclosure is good. That also means that being in the electric vehicle business, by the way, since it's growing, is a great career move and a fun, innovative space. I loved working in the space. I met all these cool, interesting people who were down to earth and smart at the same time and doing great things. So I loved it. But where are those opportunities? What's the industry facing? Where do we go from here? How do we get more women in the industry? Let's dive in. I'd like you to meet one of the top women in the C-suite of, if not the largest car company, one of the largest car companies in the world, and probably the most iconic brand. I'd like you to meet Telva McGruder, who is the Chief of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for General Motors, and a woman who has spent about 20 years at General Motors, climbing the proverbial corporate ladder to the C-suite. Prior to being named Chief Diversity Officer, she held several leadership positions that gave her a bird's eye view of what it's really like to work there. She led facilities engineering for the GM global footprint, facilities management strategy for North American manufacturing, was DIE program manager, whatever that is, for global body manufacturing engineering, we'll find out, and other roles. And before coming to GM, I saw in some of the coverage of her that she worked at NASA. So there's an interesting pivot in there, you know. She earned a bachelor's degree in science and an MS degree in electrical engineering. So she's a bona fide engineer from Purdue University. And most importantly for us, she's a fan of the sisterhood. She's on the board of the Girl Scouts and even a member of the advisory board of the University of Michigan School for Environment and Sustainability. Telva, you got us covered. Welcome to Electric Ladies, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Joan. It is wonderful to be here with you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. So since you've worked at General Motors for so many years, you've seen the auto sector up close through some really interesting evolution. What trends do you see? I mean, I talked about going more into electric vehicles, but what trends have you seen in the industry? How have you seen it evolve over time? And what's it been like working there through this evolution? Because it's pretty massive evolution.
So, yes, I have seen a tremendous amount of change in the automotive industry over all these years. I've been with General Motors for 28 years, and in the industry, and definitely with General Motors, we have evolved. And one thing I love about the auto industry and about our company is that we believe in continuously making things better, whether it be making our vehicles safer or making our vehicles more focused on the customer and what does our customer need. And that frankly changes from generation to generation. over time. And when I think about the through lines that I've seen, the things that have changed the most, I mean, the emphasis on safety for each and every one of our employees has definitely been a strong through line. And our emphasis on customer. What does the customer need? And not just in terms of, one of the best evolutions is not just what does the customer need to get from point A to point B, but what do the people that drive our vehicles need such that the vehicle could fulfill the things that it needs to fulfill in their lives. Mm. And when we think about that over time, even how we think about, what constitutes a life, it's changed in our society and it's changed in how we design our vehicles. And we think about healthier living and we think about less stress in living. And so when we at General Motors talk about zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion, we're thinking about more safety for our customers. We're thinking about, a better environment for every single person that's in and around our vehicles. And we're thinking about less stress. So that's a huge evolution in even how we think about the purpose.
It's so interesting what you said, because what you're saying is that the evolution of the auto sector and the automobile and mobility has evolved as people's lifestyles have changed, as their life priorities have changed, as their values have changed, as we've gotten more information, more technologies. Obviously, I moderated and hosted a big conference on women in the auto sector the other day, which I'll talk more about in a minute. But there were so many different types of women in the auto sector in that network and on that summit, right? That you really got a sense of how much the auto sector is almost more of a technology sector than just a transportation sector these days, right?
Absolutely. And that's a consequence of many things. It's a consequence of, what we're working to provide in the vehicles and how technology has evolved such that data are present in the vehicle, in the core of the vehicle, in the way that we work with the vehicle as drivers and users of those vehicles. Data are really everywhere. And so what we're doing as we develop our vehicles is we really are taking advantage of the fact that data is our ally, right? And it allows us to do amazing things that we couldn't conceive before. And it allows the vehicle to answer questions for the user that it couldn't answer before. And it allows people to be more comfortable in their vehicles in terms of the way the vehicle handles, in terms of the way people can interact with the vehicle. So yeah, it's very much, user-focused, technology-driven innovation, in the auto industry, and definitely at General Motors.
And a lot of it goes on without us even knowing it. I mean, the car is talking to itself, right? The regenerative braking in electric vehicles, for example, that just, you don't have to do anything. You're just applying the brakes like you would otherwise, but it's sending all kinds of data hither and yon and activating this and that. There's so many technologies that play into this, that what that also means is you need different types of people, right?
Right.
And you need different kinds of skills. And it's not just the typical assembly plant job versus executive job today, right? I mean, you might even need robotics. When I was at Chrysler, we had some robotics in the assembly plant. And you need data analytics, to your point of data, right? So how has the talent management piece evolved over these years? And it's interesting because you probably didn't, you see it now in hindsight, but when you're doing something day to day, you don't always see how it's changing. You're just like, oh, well, I need an X for this role now. And that's, maybe that's different, but you probably don't even realize how different it is except in hindsight, right? So How have you seen the need for talent evolve, skill set wise and experience wise, over the 28, 29 years you've been there? I didn't realize it was quite that long.
We'll call it 28. Just got to my 28th year, so I'm really excited.
Oh, happy anniversary. There you go. Happy
Thank
anniversary.
you. Yeah, just this month. So, it's evolved a lot. When we think about, I hired in as an electrical engineer, actually as a controls engineer, and I worked with robotics on many different types of machinery and equipment in manufacturing sites, and also worked with machine controls. And when I came in as an electrical engineer, that's what a lot of electrical engineers did. We did coding for robots and for machines and things of that nature. And when we would fill open positions, it was pretty easy to put out a requisition and say, okay, this is what we're looking for, because it was very similar to what we'd always looked for. So for mechanical engineers, yes, you may be working on engines, or you may be working on assembly equipment, or you may be working on design of same, in our engineering organization. But it was pretty similar. And the rate of change of the types of talent that was needed was much slower at that time than it is today. So one of the big things that's changed with acquiring talent and thinking about what talent we need is we are acquiring talent that has different capabilities at a much faster rate than we ever have. So to say that a bit differently, the types of skill sets we need are multivariable now, like they never have been before. And along with that, those particular skills are evolving so fast that when we think about the talent that we need, what we really have to think about is, what is it that we're going to be doing 3 years from now, 4 years from now, and what type of talent should we bring in today that we're confident can evolve with us, that can grow with us and grow really quickly. So we're not only looking for the skill set, but we're looking for adaptability. We're looking for collaborators. We're looking for people that have intersectional types of skills as well. And so it's very interesting, because while my whole career I worked closely with mechanical engineers, and over my career I evolved from being primarily an electrical engineer to an electromechanical engineer and things like that. That was a much slower evolution than it is today. So if we bring in today, for example, an environmental engineer, that environmental engineer may be working on battery development today, and they may be working on process efficiencies in our manufacturing sites tomorrow. And they may be figuring out how to put those together when it comes to creating a more sustainable future a year from now. Okay. And so we're really looking for talent that can adapt like that, and that can readily work with the data analytics team, and readily work with all the teams that we have that are quickly evolving to do whatever it takes.
No, I'm really glad you said that. One of the things I found in corporate America, and in addition to Chrysler, I worked at Deloitte and American Express as well. So I have my corporate chops, if you will. But one of the things I've noticed in working in big companies, both inside and as a consultant, et cetera, and covering them, is they always tend to recruit the same way. They tend to recruit for fit. They tend to recruit for history of depth of experience in a given given skill set, somebody who's been a mechanical engineer for, 10, 20 years. And the environment that you're describing, and the innovation and innovative thinking, which I want to get to in a minute, that we need, doesn't fit into that style of recruiting. Okay. I mean, if Chrysler had posted a job, I never worked in the car business before I went to Chrysler. I didn't own a car. The word automotive or vehicle was nowhere on my resume. If they had posted a job and I had applied, the applicant tracking system would have kicked me. They would never know my name. It came about as a fluke. And in fact, my boss, the CEO who hired me, the president who hired me, said, that's why you were successful, because you didn't come in with the legacy thinking of, oh, this is the way we've always done it, But so how are you changing your recruiting system so that it doesn't kick
Yes.
out the innovative thinkers like me and doesn't kick out. I mean, you need, to have intersectionality, to have adaptability. You need people who are not coming from the traditional model of the career ladder. So how are you adapting your process internally and training people in HR and whatever other divisions intersect with that to not, to screen in instead of screen out?
I love that question, Joan. It's a fantastic question because it takes work and it takes commitment to really screen in versus screen out. I love the way you put that. We are approaching this in many ways. Our talent acquisition team is helping the business, along with our human resources professionals, helping the business to really rethink what is it we need. We don't simply need an electrical engineer or a mechanical engineer or a person with a computer science degree. What are the skills that we're looking for? What are the interests that we need in the talent that's coming in? And we're helping the leaders in the organization write job descriptions in a different way than we have written them before, in a way that's really succinct and to the point, that says, yes, these would be the degrees that we think might be aligned with this role, but really what we're looking for is these kinds of skills. And we are using tools to help us write job descriptions that will be attractive to the kinds of people that we're really looking for in those roles, not in terms of best fit, but in terms of best skills, best interests, best abilities when it comes to emotional intelligence and behavioral acumen as well. And so when we write the job description, we want it to excite the person, and we want it to really light up people that have those skills and have those interests. And it takes work to go from the traditional way of writing a job description of these are the 5,000 things you need to be able to do, okay, to writing a job description that says, this is what we're doing in our department. These are the kind of skills that are going to help us achieve our goals. And this is why it's exciting to come and work at General Motors. And we use tools to make sure that those job descriptions are more inclusive, and so that we can cast a broad net and attract a lot of different types of individuals, so that we can find those that are going to be able to work well together as we innovate and pioneer the future.
I'm so glad you said that. I'm smiling because there are, when you're on the ground and you've worked in all these, as I said in the introduction, you've been on the ground, right? You've been in these plants. And so you know what it's like to literally have to work with people who are different around you and who may value different things, and they're all pivoting. One of the things I wanted to ask you about related to that pivot is, because you've managed facilities, there's also, General Motors made this commitment to phase out, as I said, ICE cars. And that's massive. You have, a restaurant can close for renovations, girlfriend. It's like, this is nuts, right? So how do you possibly transition an entire manufacturing company of the order of magnitude of General Motors from phasing out the core products it has built its entire infrastructure around for like 100 years, literally, to completely different products with different processes to assembly them, different parts, many fewer parts, different skills required. How do you do that?
Well, it has literally been over 110 years that we've been in business. And when we first started talking about electric vehicles, and then we came out with our vision of zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion, you better bet our team members were trying to figure out, oh my goodness, how does that happen? And I will say, Joan, that I am so grateful to work with such a talented group of people that understood that we don't do this overnight. We don't, shut down for 2 years and turn it back on for many different reasons. Changing our trajectory, so to speak, from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles is impactful both personally and professionally, technically, to not only our team members, but also to all the communities that we touch by virtue of this change. And so the first thing you have to do is understand that. The first thing you have to do is understand that there are team members that are working on internal combustion engines that are trying to understand, what does this mean for my future? And so our leadership team started articulating, how we're going to make this transition, and that it is going to occur over a number of years, and that we are going to all learn together, and that our internal combustion engine vehicles are still magnificent, and we're going to continue making them better and better every year, which is what we've continued to do. They are less impactful on the environment with every iteration, and will continue to be for as long as we continue to make internal combustion engines. And we need talent to help us do that, while we're using additional talent to help us design a magnificent Ultium battery structure that gives us the versatility to migrate into electric vehicles on multiple different platforms. And we had to explain to our team members that some of you will develop new skills that will allow you to work in electric vehicles. And as we discovered the things that we needed to really get good at, like for instance, electric vehicle infrastructure and charging infrastructure and things of those natures, okay, let's match, team members with those skill sets, leaders that have the ability to lead in new areas with those opportunities. And let's also bring in new team members. And so it really takes transparent conversation, as much communication as we possibly can, and knowing that even when we do that, as and seek to constantly get better at our communication, that it can't ever stop, because people have to understand how they can play in all the change that's going on. So it's a massive undertaking of change management, and a lot of great planning, and a lot of adjustments, and learning and growing into this future through every part of our business, not only engineering and technology and information technology, but also public policy and finance and manufacturing. Every part of our business evolving along the way.
Oh, I'm sure. And you have unions, obviously, to deal with, and you probably have people who are. I mean, when I was at Chrysler, there were still people who were like, I want my job back. It's like, no, but you're pivot, learn something new, stretch your brain, learn, but there are people who just don't really want to change, and we can't leave them behind. So I imagine that some of what you're doing is taking care of those people, when you said you don't want to leave anybody behind.
Yeah.
One of the things that goes with this is you're evolving the whole industry, evolving General Motors, and innovating, and really, you're creating it's a whole new industry, right? Because it's not even just, when we say electric vehicles, there are various types of electric vehicles. And I don't just mean a Corvette. By the way, I love that radiant picture of you in the Corvette, with the Corvette or the Acadia SUV or whatever, right? I'm talking about different types of different technologies of electric vehicles. But one of the things that comes up in the innovation process, especially with these diverse teams and skill sets, is the inevitable conflict. Conflict can be a fuel. And a lot of company cultures like consensus. And to me, consensus is the enemy of innovation because it's lowest common denominator, rather than, there's a difference between, to me, buy-in and consensus. Buy-in is, that might not be my choice, but I'm committed, right? So how do you leverage conflict? I'm not even going to say manage it, because it's almost really leveraging it as, to me, as fuel. I mean, tell me how you see conflict and how you manage it, because that can really help you, if it doesn't get in your way.
Yes, I love this question as well. So every single one of our team members has something to bring, and I like to tell people that you are here for a reason. So that's true, whether you are working in a manufacturing site, or you're working in engineering, or you're working in finance, whether you're hourly, whether you're salaried, you're here for a reason. And your voice matters. And at General Motors, we're working to uplift inclusion. We are seeking to become the most inclusive company in the world. And we have no desire to be there alone. We want other companies to be working on the same thing. We want it to be a race to the top, so to speak. And when I talk about what does the most inclusive company look like, I explain that there are a couple of levels of outcomes. And the first level of outcome, when you're really thinking about an environment of inclusion, is you're thinking about an environment where people are working to their full capacity every day, where they're bringing their unique skills and they're sharing them and they're collaborating and they're achieving things that they cannot achieve alone, but are not achieved easily. They feel comfortable speaking up. They really look forward to feedback. And they're bold. At General Motors, we have a behavior. We have 8 General Motors behavior that we value. And one of them is be bold. Another one is be inclusive. And we have several others. But what you want in an inclusive environment is an environment where people are comfortable being bold and speaking up. And so what I tell people, when we're being inclusive, it doesn't mean we're skipping through the daisies and always getting along and never disagreeing with each other and, have perfect compromises. That's not what it means. When we have an environment that's truly inclusive and people have a true sense of belonging, we are going to disagree with each other, but we have an environment where those disagreements are the fuel for the future, right? Where someone speaks up and they say, I'm not sure if that's right. And the other person says, help me understand why you're saying that. And that's how conflict can fuel innovation, and conflict can fuel solutions that really aren't on the table of imagination before the conflict occurs. Okay, they're not in the vision. But you can't get there until you have a truly inclusive environment, until you have teams that know that regardless of what they say, even if they're not in a brainstorming session, okay, regardless of what they say, they will be heard. Their idea may not win, but it doesn't mean that your idea always wins. What it means is that your idea adds to the mix, is sifted through, and a version of it may or may not come out of the other side, but it hasn't been dismissed. Okay, it's added to the conclusion.
Oh, I think that's great. I describe it as it's about what happens in the room.
That's right.
And if people roll their eyes or grunt, and some of it is, is unconscious and almost automatic reflex, but or you just kind of go, oh, that's ridiculous, under your breath, you might be shutting down somebody who, has a great idea. I mean, my great uncle, frankly, went through this. He was a famous physicist and he almost got shut down until his inventions changed the world, and then they suddenly liked him. It's kind of funny how that works. But because it is about what happens in the room, especially for women, because women, been there, done that. I mean, I have some painfully accurate cartoons of, a woman sitting in a conference room and the caption says, oh, Mary, that's a wonderful idea. Maybe one of the men would like to present it. It's like this insane thing. Or one that was a cartoon about the diversity and inclusion that was all white men on the panel, and the caption said, "This is a panel about why there are no women on a panel about women in the sector." I mean, it's just like, but this is like present day. I mean, it's craziness, right? So women present ideas differently than men do, besides presenting different ideas. You know, when I was at Chrysler, and we drive differently. When I was at Chrysler, I looked at the data. You know, they give you these high level marketing summary reports, and I went, okay, fine, I want the real data. And on the real data, I saw other trends, including women. That when you asked who was buying the car, if there was a couple, a lot of times the person on the other end of the phone would give the woman on the phone would give the phone to her husband. But what really happens, and tell me if this is your experience, is a wife will say, "Here, honey, here's 5 cars I'll drive, pick one." Who's picking the car? And women have different priorities when it comes to driving. And so if you don't have the right diversity at the table, we all buy cars, right? I mean, kids are buying cars. I had 16-year-old kids buying gem cars for their first car, for our electric cars. So if you don't have that diversity at the table, your innovation's not going to work, because they're all buying cars and they're all influencing the decision, right? And they may not always agree, duh. So one of the other things, I'm going to ask a couple of things and I'll let you go, but one of the things that was really interesting to me, and speaking of this innovating and pivoting, is during the pandemic, you guys frankly did what I think is a pretty heroic thing. When you had to close down the plants because of the pandemic, but then you reopened some and transformed your manufacturing process to produce ventilators that were in desperate need. That kind of blew me away. So talk to me a little bit about how that decision came down, who was at the table, how you did that. I mean, you manage these facilities. How do you change an automotive plant to make ventilators?
It's a story we all like to talk about. At the time that was going on, I was leading facility engineering and facility management for North America, and we were in a pandemic. We had shut down our facilities. We were working on developing protocols for how to bring our team members back to work safely. And then I walked into a meeting with our manufacturing leadership team, and they said, "Our country has a need for ventilators, and we're going to try to figure out how to help." And with that, we were off to the races, and we started looking at options for facilities that we could use to do it. And we had people working weekends, going in, scouting out facilities, seeing what was possible, what wasn't possible, in spaces that were available to modify. We got the engineers in, we got the safety team in, we got the manufacturing team, the industrial engineers, the finance team. We pulled everyone together to figure out what can we do and how quickly, who can we partner with to help us with the technical know-how. It was truly amazing, Joan, to see how quickly we could pull together, members of our team from every spectrum of the GM team to make this happen. But really what made it happen best is that we said, what must be true? What must be true in order for us to do this? And number two, how can we use the skill sets we have as a manufacturing company that knows how to design efficient processes, that knows how to quickly make continuous improvement? How can we use those skill sets here? And how can we work with our partners of all types to bring to bear the materials and the components and the technical knowledge and the know-how to do it? How can we work with business partners to make it happen? And we asked for help. We asked for help from inside and outside of the company. And it was amazing how people, put down what they were working on and ask for help to finish what they were working on so they could go help with ventilators, right? So we didn't drop any balls while we were doing it. Wow. We really created an environment where ideas were open, ideas were welcome. And when we realized we didn't have the right people in the room, we got the right people in the room. Okay. So it was a fantastic use of our diverse talent. And it was super exciting for us because with every day we gained more momentum and we just did it.
It's interesting. What you made me think of is how that might be contributing to the company's ability to innovate. Yes. Jerry Hirschberg, who was the first head of Nissan Design International, wrote the creative priority about his process of doing that and designing the company around the creative process. And I got to know Jerry, bless his heart. And one of the things he talked to me about, and he wrote about in his book, was how he would periodically shut down a plant and send them all to a museum or send them all to something completely different or give them something else to build, just to get their brain thinking differently, right? And so I would pose it that it would be interesting to see if the people who had to use their brains differently at General Motors to make ventilators have become maybe a little more innovative for General Motors in general, because they sort of used other muscles in their brains, to think differently in order to do it. It's really fascinating.
I'll say that.
Go ahead.
I'll say that certainly the experience we had at the beginning of the pandemic and that pivot to ventilators and moving at ventilator speed, as we like to say.
No, that's good. I like it.
Was certainly a kernel for many things we've done since then. Absolutely. As we talk about how might we need to look at this, how might we think differently about this challenge that we're looking at? Who do we need to involve in this vision that we're putting together right now? And what might we do for ourselves to remove barriers to innovation, similar to what we did with ventilators? So we talk about that. And certainly I remember the day that my team came and talked about an elevator that we needed to put in this building, in a place where we would never conceive of putting an elevator in, so that we could, construct the production line in a place that was best suited for it. And I remember they walked in, they said, "This is what we need to do, and we need to do it this weekend." And I went, "What?" But the bottom line was we need to make a decision this weekend. And we were able to do that. We were able to make a decision. We were able to, pull in the right resources, both materials and people that we needed in order to do something that we would have never done under normal circumstances, and do it well and safely, right? And that kind of thing we work to try to kindle as much as we can.
So the people that worked on the ventilator project, I love that you called it the moving at the speed of ventilator speed, probably learned that they can move faster and that the organization can move faster than they anticipated.
Right. Right. And you've seen that with the Hummer EV that was just released, right? The Hummer EV was an example of one of the things we've done, since the ventilator project, that was an exhibition of the talent that we have in our typical space.
Oh, that's great. So I'm going to ask you something else, and then I like to get career advice for mid-career women. But speaking of that, as I mentioned, I hosted and moderated the Women Automotive Summit the other day, and we had hundreds of women from all over the world. Fascinating women, really incredibly talented. And they work in this industry on so many different sides. And yet women are still a minority in the auto sector, especially in leadership roles like you've had. Why are there still so few women in the auto sector, and what can companies do to attract and retain more women? You talked a little bit before about maybe rewriting your job descriptions kind of thing, but I think it's beyond that, because there's still so many hurdles, and women come with different experience. I mean, how do you, what are we missing? How does that happen? What has to happen?
Joan, there are a lot of things that have to happen. So we can't just pick one. But if I were to name a few, I would say, first of all, we really need to project the automotive sector as a place that is great for women. Okay, so when we talk about women, and as you know, I'm a Girl Scout, and I'm a huge a believer in the power of women leading, which is what we develop in Girl Scouts as women that are leaders. And what we want to do in the auto sector is project to women that you can come here, you can grow here, and you can be a leader here. And so, how do we do that? We tell stories. I think storytelling is extremely important. And I think it resonates with women. So we tell stories about women that are leading, tremendous innovation at General Motors, and we tell the stories of how they got there. We also, bring women in for different experiences at all different ages. So from young ladies, including Girl Scouts, high school students, college students, students, ladies from the community. We bring them in at all different ages and in all different ways to expose them to General Motors, to our sustainability work, to our product development work, et cetera. So exposure is extremely important. And then the way we project ourselves when we're talking to people about what we do and how we get it done. Women listen to that, and they want to hear that we're collaborating, and they want to hear that women are working on these projects, and understand how does that happen, and how are women contributing. And so, as we go out and we seek talent and we talk to talent, we're sharing and answering those questions. So with true transparency, really important, and really just demonstrating by virtue of the decisions we're making that we believe in women in our business in all different places, whether it's team leaders on the plant floor or managers that are in communications, et cetera, in marketing and our marketing team and how we do sales. We really have to demonstrate it through our actions and constantly work to increase the representation of women in our workforce so that we have more examples.
Yeah, so they can see themselves in it and see themselves in different ways.
Yes.
One of the things that you've seen in your 28 years at General Motors is you've seen male-dominated leadership and female-dominated leadership of the company. What's the difference?
I think the difference depends on the leader. But if I speak about it from a CEO perspective, currently we've had Mary Barra leading our company since 2014, and some of the wonderful things that she's done since she's come in is she has created for us a way to talk to each other that's different than what we had before in terms of behaviors. And so we've created 8 General Motors behaviors that really codify how we want to behave together in our business and what's important to us. We've also taken a new look at our company values and at our vision and our corporate purpose and the expectation of how leaders lead has changed. And we talk a lot more about leadership today than management. And a lot of that has happened because of the way that Mary leads her team and the way they in turn lead their teams. How we get work done has become so much more important than getting work done. And that is key, I think, to people feeling, people being engaged and people feeling valued, and to what people can imagine in terms of what's possible. It's a really big difference. And so codifying those, the GM behaviors, the values, our 000 vision, all of those things with Mary and her leadership team have really created a big change in what the future of General Motors looks like in the future of the electric vehicle.
Cool. Well, and also I think mirrors where society's evolved to, right?
Absolutely.
Frankly. So I have about 7,000 more questions for you, but I'll contain them. So before I let you go, though, I like to give career advice, but to mid-career women. I know you focus a lot on kids, but I know you also bring in women in mid-career, as you said, from the community, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
I like to give career advice to mid-career women, say women who have 15 years of experience, they have an education, they know what they're good at, right? But they want to work at this intersection of ambition, making money, and making a difference. They want to use who they are. So what advice, you've had such a fascinating career, you've worked in different parts of General Motors, even at NASA. What advice would you give to women in this situation who want to make a difference and are at that kind of mid-career point where it's so easy for women to just get Velcroed to a certain level, but we want to elevate them?
Yeah, that's a difficult one, but here's how I think about it when it comes to making a difference. When it comes to making a difference, you really need to build that skill. And I'm really talking about it not in the context of getting work done, getting your work done. Mid-career women are great at getting results, okay, and checking the box of the goals that you had for the year. But if we say making a difference is making a difference for the people around you and making a big difference for the business you're in and maybe for the communities that you move in, that takes practice. And it takes really sitting back and looking at how should I behave every single day so that I'm making a difference for people. And this is something that I started working on many years ago when I realized that as a technical leader, I could solve all the technical problems in the world, but there were a lot of days where I still had people around me that weren't necessarily super excited about being at work, that weren't necessarily, really bringing their best to work every day. And so I started working on making a difference for them. And what I realized when I started working on that was that I wasn't great at it all the time, right? I was, sometimes I got lucky, but I started practicing and I started figuring out for different people, what do I need to do? And then, okay, for these teams, what needs to happen? And you look at what is the challenge that the team is facing, whether it be the team you're leading or it be the teams that you're working with, right, on a broader basis. Like, what's really going on here? How do I listen with a third ear and really hear why decisions are being made? And let's go work on that. Not necessarily focusing on the superficial thing, the thing that everyone can see is happening. Let's focus on why that's happening and practice getting after that underlying why so that you can truly make a difference in the trajectory of the way people are feeling or teams are behaving together. That's the key, but it's hard. You try something, it doesn't necessarily work. Let's try something else. Let's figure out what this is. And then once you learn, take those tidbits and use them the next time you apply those learnings. That's really how you find out how to make a difference. And the other thing that's wonderful about that is that you can't really do that well unless you really understand where you're coming from first. So you really, really do, particularly as a mid-career woman, that's the point in your career where you can sit and breathe and figure out, who am I? What works well for me? And always work from that center, right? As opposed to trying to be other people, as opposed to, I'm not saying don't admire people, and I'm just saying always work from your center And when you work from your center and then you practice making a difference, you just get better at making a difference, and you find those lanes where you can make the biggest difference, and then just continue to drive down those lanes. And that's frankly how I ended up in the position I'm in right now, leading diversity, equity, inclusion after a whole career in technology, right? I just kept driving down those lanes.
Well, I think that's perfect. And I think what's underneath that too is an authenticity, right? It's like when you're being who you really are, that authenticity shows up in your relationships because you listen differently, you hear differently, you are more curious than judgmental, you're kinder and have more compassion, and have compassion for yourself as well as for other people. And so I love that. I could drill into that for another 2 hours with you, but I'll resist the temptation. Thank you so much, Telva. You're an absolute delight. It's been glorious to talk to you. Do you have any final thoughts before I let you get back to your work?
You know, Joan, it's been great to be here with you this afternoon. And when I think about women, and I think about the way that women think about what's possible, and the way that, you know, integration of women into all the decisions we're making, particularly as we think about the future of our society and the future of the electric vehicle, I think about the fact that we don't want to just harness the energy of women just so that we can say we've harnessed it. What we want to do is harness the energy of women so that it can grow, right? So that it can become a seed of growth for not only those women, but all the people that can be impacted by the work that they're doing. So when I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion for women and many others, that's what I think about. I think about harnessing the energy, the unique energy that every person has, and allowing that to grow and develop in ways that we cannot yet imagine. And what's really exciting about the future in front of us as we work on reducing our impact on our climate, and as we work on creating a society that will be safer for people and less stressful for people, I think about how the power of harnessing that unique energy of individuals will allow us to do it. So I'm super excited about that, and I'm thankful to have been able to spend this time with you.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that. That's quite perfect. So thank you again so much, Telva McGruder, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at General Motors. I did own a Malibu, by the way, at one point. So thank you for joining us today on Electric Ladies Podcast. So are you driving an electric vehicle, or you plan to? What Telva said, what resonated with you? What resonated with you of what she said? I mean, there's so much that she just said about, I mean, how are you making a difference? How are you using who you are in this new economy? So tell me, what questions you have for Telva? Tell us, send it to me on Twitter at Joan Michelson. You might win a 30-minute complimentary coaching session with me. You never know, through our weekly drawing. Subscribe to our mailing list, pass it on to your friends. Come back and listen to us again. We want your feedback. We are listening, as she says. We practice what we preach. So thank you again for joining us. I'm Joan Michelson. See you next time.